Hello, and the biggest of welcomes to This Woman's Work, a space where you can hear and read about some amazing women, the fantastic jobs they do, and the paths that have led them to where they are today. So I'm here today with Sally. Hi, Sally.
Hi.
Could you tell the lovely listener what it is you do for a living?
So I am a
I do have a job.
Okay, we might have to cut this bit out already. I already feel like I'm on an interview. 5 minutes ago we were just having a normal chat. Now
About
it's
escorts, and now we're here. Yeah,
and now we're here.
and all of this is staying in.
So thanks for that. I am a paediatric emergency nurse. I say emergency nurse, that's my background. At the moment, I'm doing any kind of paediatrics at the moment, but emergency is my kind of passion, and yeah, that's my background.
And how long have you been doing that for then?
I have been... So before I left last year, I was in the NHS for 23 years. And qualified for, I've got to work the dates out now, I think 19.
So we have to go back to Sally. School, college, what were you like? What were you into?
Well, you know what I was like at school, don't you? What was I like at school?
I
was always...
really quirky, I would say. Well, you just were, weren't you? You just didn't like to conform. You just didn't, any kind of... It was refreshing, because let's face it, most of school is most people wanting just to fit in and be the same.
Some will say a rebel.
Yeah.
Do you know what? I think I've always wanted to push the boundaries of anybody. Do you know what I mean? And not in a nasty way, but I think I've always wanted to... I've had quite a questioning mind, and I'm not very good at taking... if somebody says, this is this and this is how it is... And sometimes I think, well, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
So I need to know why that's like that, which is why I would always probably push the teachers and question things and say, have you thought about it from this side? But I did get in quite a lot of trouble, I guess, at school. Not loads of trouble.
No, I think you did.
No, I just got sent out a lot. Usually when somebody else was talking. And then turn around and go, Sally, out.
Got blamed for everyone else chatting.
I always got the blame, just because I wasn't the shy retiring one, and I was like the one that would sort of stand up and put myself out there.
So then, did you go to college after?
I went to sixth form.
Sixth form, yeah. So, and what A-levels did you do?
I did... I can't remember.
Because I was thinking, did she just bugger off travelling?
No, I did English, literature.
Yes.
Most boring thing I've ever done in my life. Oh, Lord. Why did I choose English literature? It had the potential to be really interesting.
Yeah.
Until they bring out these books like...
Just a load of Hamlet.
Jane Austen. Oh, it was just the most boring thing. Yeah. So I did that. I did psychology. I started off doing sociology, which I thought was going to be really, really interesting and right up my street.
Yeah.
But the teacher was just really, really dull.
So then left college. What was the plan? You just went travelling?
I went travelling. I had a year out and I went off to live in Zimbabwe. And then, so I applied for, I had to go to this selection camp to go to Zimbabwe the first time. And I had to go to Scotland, to the Isle of Coll.
Wow.
And it was this tiny little island. There was like about 20 people that lived there. And we had to go and do this whole selection process. It was all sorts of things. We lived for a week and we had to go and do things like herding sheep and like this traditional Scottish dancing. And we had to basically prove that we were a team member, that we could climb a hill, we could do all of this, yeah. Anyway, went for this thing. I didn't get on. I didn't get through. Out of all the people, there was only like a handful that didn't get through. I hadn't got through, and I was absolutely devastated. Yeah. Absolutely devastated. Like my heart was broken. And I remember my auntie coming round and saying, like, this could just be the opening to something else. Like sometimes you get really disappointed by one thing, but it's another door opening, and and I just thought that was the end. Like I'm never going. I felt like a failure.
Yeah.
It was either like I do this or I'm not doing it kind of thing. And then when my auntie had said that, I thought, do you know what? Actually, I need to pull myself together after about a week of crying in my bedroom. So then reapplied to a different organisation.
Yeah. So the same people, the same course, but just the next year, or?
No, it was a completely different organisation.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you
completely
were like,
different.
you.
And yeah, well, I mean, I couldn't go with them because they'd turn me down, but it just shows you that's how things work out in a different way in life. If I had gone with that first group, I wouldn't have gone with Soph.
Yes.
We wouldn't have the friendship that we have. I wouldn't be godmum to Millie.
Kids,
you know, things would be completely different.
Yes.
You know, we wouldn't be having this conversation probably because we've probably stayed friends through Soph more. Do you know what I mean? So it's
So do you believe in that? Do you believe in like the universe?
100%.
Do you that there is that the universe has basically has got a plan for you?
I think the universe has your back 100%. And I think that you have to work with it. And you have to have the right mindset. You have to put action in place. Your life. Yeah. You can't just think the universe is going to look after me and I'm just going to sit here in this corner and just expect it to happen.
Yeah.
But I do always think that the universe is working in my favour.
Do you?
I do always think that the cards are tipped in my favour so that things will always work out.
You? So you believe
genuinely,
that?
Yeah.
And would you say you're quite a positive person because of that?
Yeah, definitely. But I've had to work at it. There's times, and there's always times, I'm not always positive. There's times when you're hit by something, aren't there? And it gives you a completely different perspective and you have to kind of dig yourself back out into some sort of state of positivity. But I think generally now my natural state is to think more that I'm a winner than a loser. Do you know what I mean? Like I will generally see the good in whatever happens. Yeah. I'll generally be able to see
the
positive.
So do you think that level of positivity though is also because of what you've seen? Because you have really seen. So if we go back to, you did Zimbabwe.
Yeah. Came
back from there. How long was Zimbabwe?
So that was 9 months, first time. But I've lived in Africa on and other places, but on and off for like about 2.5 years.
Yeah. So you didn't really come back to the UK very much in those younger years, did you?
I came back after the first trip to Zimbabwe, and the plan then was to do a photography. I was enrolled in college to go and do a photography course, BTEC in photography. I went there, did a few months, and I just missed Africa. Wow. And I was like, I need to go back. And I knew there were other countries that I wanted to go to. So I'd been in Zimbabwe and travelled a little bit to Malawi, Mozambique, and around that area. And I ended up on a small island in Kenya and I got married.
Wow.
At 20, as you do.
And how long? So how long were you in Kenya before you got married then? Before you met
so there was
Mr. Right, Not Right.
I think I met him on my first trip and we were there for 3 months, but not just in Kenya.
Yeah, okay.
And we were travelling around. And then I went back and I was there, I think, about a year.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I was basically living on this island with my husband-to-be, and I was getting married the next day. And I thought, I'm going to have to tell my mum that I'm getting married. So I bought a phone card. So I used to buy a phone card. It was I remember it was 100 shillings, which was about £1. And it only gave you a certain amount of time on the phone. Well, by the time my mum got to the phone, you had to go to a call box. By the time my mum got to the phone card, the money had gone. So I couldn't tell her. And I was getting married the next day. So I was like, oh, what am I going to do? So I just got married. As you do. And then I wrote her a letter.
Right.
And so in the letter I said, I was ringing yesterday.
No picture.
No picture, because, we didn't have...
I was going to say, actually, where were you going to get that developed?
Yeah, I would have had to have gone to... I was on an island with literally, like, this is a very...
a drawing.
Yeah. This is what I want him to look like. This is my artist's impression of my husband.
need to draw that. I feel like you need to draw that for one of the visuals for this podcast.
Little dreadlocks. He had little dreadlocks. I could draw those. And it didn't work out. It lasted. We were together. I think we were married about 7 years.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah. Were you married to him when you started?
Yeah, we were married, and then I started training.
Yeah.
So I was 24.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'd come here. We'd moved to Leicester, and I had started working at the hospital in a clerical role.
Yeah.
And I did that for a few years, and then I just thought I need something more. Like there's only so far that this is going to go. Like there's only so much I can earn in this role, and there's only so far I can go, and I need a little bit more direction. So then I decided to train as a nurse. Wow. So that's
and
how
you
it
did that
happened.
in Leicester alongside Leicester Uni. Did you have to go to
De Montfort Uni in Leicester? Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so then qualified, and part of that, what made you go more down the paediatrics route then?
I initially applied for adults,
right,
and then I was taken around the hospital by I can't remember her surname. Her name was Karen. She was so lovely, and she gave me a tour of all of the children's wards. She's passed away now, sadly, yeah. But she took me around the whole hospital and all the children's wards, and I just thought, I think this is for me. And it was when she took me to intensive care, and I saw all the kids in intensive care, which you can imagine it's a bit of a it's a difficult environment to work in. It is difficult, but I just thought, this is me. I need to be doing children's, and that's when I swapped over onto doing children's.
Manchester, because had you got children at this point when you first started?
I hadn't got any children, had I by then. So it's very, very different nursing children when you've got your own children to doing it without children. So I did kind of the general wards for a year and a half, and then I moved into ITU, and I did about 2.5 years then in ITU.
Yeah.
And obviously saw some very, very sick. I mean, I've seen so many things that I wouldn't want to even talk about on here. And but so many sick children, and but yeah, I think it's very different doing it when you've not got your own children, because you can detach from it.
Right.
And you can take yourself out of the situation, and it's not quite so real. And when you're younger as well, you go into work, you do your job, and you come home. It's only now that I look at some of the situations that I've been in and some of the things that I've seen, and I think actually nobody should really.
You kind of almost remember it in a completely different way.
Yeah. And there's no kind of. I'm supposed to be selling this profession, aren't I? But there's not for nurses. I think we're quite far behind in the NHS in any kind of counselling or post-traumatic sort of any kind of discussions following things that you might have seen.
Because nurses see patients more than anybody. They're in terms of the hours that a doctor is with a patient versus a nurse, it's going to be like 90-10. It's going to be drastically different, isn't it?
I guess depending on which area you're working in. So if you're working in ED, you have obviously a lot more doctors around, because people are needing to be seen, treated, diagnosed in the emergency department. And in ITU as well. But on the wards, your doctors are sort of
coming once a day.
Popping in and out, or probably more than that. But you're having to call somebody in the night, so it is you there really with them most of the time. Yeah.
So then had your kids?
Then had the boys while I was had Marley while I was working I was in ED in the emergency department when I had Marley. My first. And then I came back. I think I went onto neonates then, onto the neonatal.
Did you?
Yeah.
Gosh. So you had Marley and then went back?
I did, yeah.
Didn't put you off at all, though?
No, because it was by that point, it was my job and my vocation, and I knew it, and I felt comfortable and confident going back. I didn't go back into the emergency department.
Okay.
Because I think I'd seen so many things that I couldn't unsee, if you know what I mean. And I thought, do you know, I think I'm going to find this difficult, having a child and working in this environment and being reminded constantly of the things that can go wrong.
I know. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So I thought, no, it's not for me anymore. However, I've been back twice since, and then I carried on. Carried on in that area, but I kind of took some time out and went into neonates.
Okay. But even that still.
Yeah, it still can be tough. Yeah.
And then, were you full time, or did you go back part time?
I went back part time after having Marley, so I was full time before, and I went back part time, and I've never been back full time since. I don't think I ever want to be full time.
No.
Again.
Are many nurses full time? Do you know? Because of everything you've just described.
So a lot of the time, we do a lot of 12-hour shifts, and to be full time, you have to do 3 12-hour shifts a week.
Yeah.
So in a space of 4 weeks, you would do 3 weeks of 12-hour shifts and 1 week of 3 weeks. In the space of a month, you would do 4 weeks.
Yeah.
3 of those being 3 shifts a week.
Yeah.
And 1 of them being a week of 4 shifts.
Right.
But a lot of nurses drop that 4th shift. Right. And they say it makes the world of difference.
So dropping 1 shift is then part-time?
That's classed as part-time.
I know, even though that's
And you're still working 34 and a half hours a week.
I was going to say, bearing in mind full-time is like 37 and a half.
Yeah. And when I say I don't work full-time, I do work... Yeah, I'm not far underneath that. Yeah. It's not like I'm part-time. Isn't it? Yeah.
Okay, so neonatal, and then what other areas have you worked in?
So intensive care. I did intensive care for a couple of years.
Yeah.
That's backtracking again. So that was before I went to neonatal. I did intensive care. So I was on the wards. I did a rotation. I then went to intensive care for a couple of years.
Yeah.
I then went to A&E.
Yeah.
Then to neonatal. Then back to A&E.
Yeah. And what made you go back to A&E? Because you've got kids at this point.
Yeah, I had. And I just think with A&E, you're either, or I call it ED now, with ED, you're either an ED nurse or you're not. It's like either it's in your blood or it's not. There's different kinds of nurses. There's ITU, there's ED, there's, you're either surgical or you're medical. ED is a mixture of everything and anything.
And very fast-paced.
Very fast-paced. Yeah. Very much thinking on your feet. Every day is completely different.
Which a lot of people don't like, do they? I guess a lot of people
Some people like the routine, don't they? They like to know what they're going into, and they like to get to know their patients, and they like to, I like the difference that and the pace and the
and that outweighs the pretty horrendous things you see.
I think so, and I think the thing with ED that I prefer that to something like ITU, for example, is that it still can be quite intense.
Yeah.
But a lot of the time you can make them better.
Yeah.
You physically can save a life, obviously with a whole team around you. Yeah, it's not you, but you actually.
Gosh, what a sense of sense of pride in your day. That most people are like, oh, I submitted a report today, and you're like, oh, literally resuscitated. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think you don't think about it so much when you're doing it. It's just your job. So I'm doing the wards again now.
Okay.
So I see the gratitude from parents, but you don't see that in A&E.
Yeah.
You don't. Apart from the pandemic, when nobody could do enough for us, and everybody was bringing us meals and hand creams and all sorts of things. ED was very much kind of celebrated during that time, but it. Apart from that, we don't really get the thanks. We just see them and send them on their way.
Yeah,
which is another thing I really like about A&E though, is that a lot of the kids, it's not. There are moments of sadness and there are moments of absolute. What's the word?
Despair.
Probably horror. Like there are things that you've seen and that the team have seen. I'm obviously not on my own in this. There's so many of us there, but you should never have to see and never want to ever see again. But there are also moments in ED, and a lot of moments, of somebody that's just fallen off their bike and, you know, or got a splinter in their finger, or they've,
and they want to come to A&E
there's that such a vast range of things that come through the doors, that actually it's those really difficult times are offset by all the other things that are a lot easier.
And it's that, I'm guessing, because I need to believe this for all of your sakes, that there's real sort of team camaraderie, like the actual team spirit, you'll get on very well, that kind of thing. Because obviously, like you say, going through all of that, you've at least got to really get on with your team.
Yeah. I think ED is very much like a family. It's always felt like that for me, that sort of environment. And there are people there that you've known, you know, there's people that I've known for like 20 years that I've worked with, but it's changing now. And a lot of people have left. And it's because people are not, because of the money, because of the stress. It's very, very, very stressful. And I think that's why you do become sort of like a bit of a unit and a family unit, and you stick up for each other, because you are constantly bombarded by, in that environment, there's a lot of people that are not happy because they've had to wait hours. Their child's sick, they're worried, they're hungry, they're tired, and you can understand why people feel like this.
Yeah. I know you have a little life in you yet. I know you have a lot of strength left. I know you have a little life in you yet. But
it then is sometimes rubs off on the staff, or it's they take it out on the staff.
The flip side of that, like you've just said, is then not brilliant pay.
Yeah.
So you're there doing it all really for the love of your heart.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's a lot to put up with, isn't it? For not a lot of pay.
Yeah.
I mean, working conditions, are they good?
I think. How do you describe working conditions?
I just want to know if you've at least got like free tea and coffee.
No. There is quite a toxic culture within the NHS.
At a managerial level.
Yes.
Yeah. And
I think, for me, you asked why I kept going back to ED. Why would you keep going back? Why would you keep going back? It almost, I remember describing it to someone as like being a little bit like a battered wife. It's like, it's what you know.
Yeah.
So you go back in, you get treated, you know, you don't always get treated the best by, you know, service users. You don't always, sometimes you can be you can get verbal abuse and, you know, physical abuse as well. You know, there was a guy that came into Leicester, and I don't know if you saw it on the news, that came in with a machete.
Oh, gosh.
And into the adult department.
There?
I wasn't there, no, but I know nurses that have left completely
because of
since that. Yeah.
So how long ago did you leave to go to agency then?
So I've been doing agency about 6 months.
Oh, okay. So
only
really
6
recently.
months, yeah.
And
so
prior to that, you were back in ED?
Prior to that, I was in a hospice for a year.
Okay, wow.
So came out of ED.
Yeah.
Just because I needed to step out of it.
Yeah.
It was getting so crazily busy.
And this was after COVID.
This was post-COVID. So during COVID, it was beautiful. Nobody came down. No, well, not nobody, but it was not that many people came down.
Yeah.
You've got to bear in mind, like, Leicester is I don't know if it's the busiest or biggest paediatric in the country. It's
massive.
It's big. It's very big, and we see a lot of patients. And I think the most we've had in the department at one time when I was there was 110 kids with families. So it's a lot of people.
Yeah.
And when you're struggling with staffing issues and you're in charge of a shift, it's it's just a lot of pressure, and it's constant. And I'd done it for so many years, and I just felt that I needed to step out of it.
Well, like
and just to see what else was out there.
Yeah, and like you've just said, post-COVID, a lot of people had left as well, so it's put even more pressure on.
So there's such a huge turnover of nurses post-COVID.
And what about post-Brexit? Did you get, I guess, people, those, you know, as in like people that were here on, you know, migrant visas, that kind of thing?
We used to have a lot of Spanish, Portuguese nurses that were amazing. And a lot of those went back. Yeah. Yeah, which was a huge blow to the department because they were really, really amazing. And now we recruit a lot in India, Africa. And then it just got busier and busier and busier. And I just thought I need a change. And so I went into a hospice for a year.
Gosh. And is that, a lot of that is end of life care? Am I right?
Yeah, there's end of life. And there is a lot of respite as well. Yeah. So it's kind of a bit of everything. I felt like I needed to experience it because I've never done it before.
Yeah.
And I almost feel like I needed to give back a little bit or just have that experience. You know that I had my son in the middle of my two well boys.
Yeah.
And he survived, he had spina bifida, so he would have been a child that would have used this hospice. He would have been a service user.
So it was always in your mind, maybe?
It was always in my mind that I wanted to sort of work with those kids and give something back a little bit.
So even in with paediatrics, even in hospice? Then?
Yeah, that was a hospice.
Gosh,
yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Wow. So how long did you do that for then?
So I did that for a year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then were you doing that when you then left, or?
How do you mean? What?
I said left to go agency, so...
Yeah, so I handed my notice in.
Aren't we?
Yeah. So I did that for a year.
Yeah.
And then, again, and I loved it. Don't get me wrong, I absolutely loved it. And I loved, like, the kids that I met and the families and just having that time to connect more with families. Like in ED, you see somebody and they're gone.
Yeah.
And then you see someone else and they're gone. Whereas this is seeing the same kids coming back every few months and like building up a relationship with the families, with the siblings, and having the time to care a bit more and to get to know those people. And then, so I did that for a year, but then ultimately I did miss the clinical side of it and the fast pace.
Yeah.
And it was also very, very sad.
Yeah.
It was also really sad, and I needed to prioritise my own mental health.
Yeah.
And I knew that I needed more. The pay was worse than the NHS.
Yeah.
And I was being sort of told I had to work certain hours and they wanted me to do more day shifts, and it just didn't work for me.
Yeah.
I needed to work more nights for childcare, for money. And so I just thought, this is not working, and I've only got so many more years left of my career, and I now need to make this work for me.
Yeah.
So I can work. So I work now in a lot of different hospitals, and so I can choose where I work. So I'll work in EDs, I'll work on paediatric wards, and I'll.
And how far in advance do you have to? So I'm guessing, do you I'm going to say this, and shoot me down. Is there some kind of web portal you go in and you can see what's all available?
You'd think that would make it really easy, wouldn't it?
Oh, what do you have to do?
Honestly, it's been the biggest learning curve going into agency. It's an absolute minefield. So when I started, I was with one agency and I thought, I think I need to join a few, because I started in the summer as well, where there's a lot less work in the summer.
Okay.
So you have to almost not compete, but with other nurses to get that work, you have to put yourself forward.
Yeah.
And they'll sometimes only book you. Sometimes I didn't even have a booking for that night, or I'd have driven down to a hospital in Telford, for example. One night I got onto the ward and they said, "We don't need you tonight." And nobody had told me. They'd cancelled me. Nobody had told me. But then luckily they said, "Oh, actually, they need you in Shrewsbury." So then I drive to Shrewsbury. So I was often going and staying in an Airbnb or something like that for a few nights. And so during the summer, you probably get, if you were lucky, a week's notice. If not, it would be a day or on the day.
Right.
But I would still say, right, these are the days that I can work and these are the days that I can't work. So I still had the flexibility around it. So I still, and generally always got a shift. I think there's always been a thing with nursing, hasn't there? It's like there's nurses and there's doctors, and nursing is not always been the best paid. Well, it's not, because it's seen as a vocation. And it's always been like that since the days of Florence Nightingale. If you're a nurse, it's because you're doing it because you care. But even a doctor is almost is seen more as a vocation, isn't it? And so that's why, you know, there's all these strikes and things about money. But people seem to think that if you go into healthcare, that you should be doing it. You should be giving and giving and giving because you want to.
Heart,
and you do it because you want to do that job. You do want to help people. But you also need to live.
Pay your bills.
And
and try and have a bit of a life.
And have a nice life as well. To balance out the difficulties. We don't just want to be surviving. You know, we want to be thriving in life. And
especially you're saying, seeing as what you see and what you have to do, it's really important you can balance that out in your private life to kind of give life, you know, really. Otherwise, you could, like you say, you'd just collapse in on yourself, surely.
Yeah, and I think the older I've got and the longer I've got in this career, the more I've realised the importance of my downtime being like rejuvenating me, or you know, on my days off, I'll try and do so many things that will bring me back to life almost, you know, just to kind of, you know, just getting out in nature and walking and wild swimming and all those things just to bring me back a sense of who I am.
So what percentage of nurses do you think are sort of agency now?
It depends.
Tend to work with?
It depends where you work, and it depends on the time of year and kind of what's just happened in certain areas. So there's some places I'll go, there's some places I'll go where it's literally pretty much all agency.
Right.
I've been in ED departments in different places where I've been the only paediatric nurse.
Oh my gosh.
And they've had a lot of agency adult nurses. Sometimes it's like a half and half mix.
Yeah.
I'd say a lot of emergency departments at the moment are probably like a 60-40, 70-30 agency heavy.
Right. And are you still predominantly picking up more ED type shifts, do you find? Or
I'm picking up more paediatric shifts at the moment. So there's a massive shortage of paediatric nurses.
What has been the best part of your career so far, do you think? Is there one shining thing or a reoccurring thing?
I think it's now.
Right.
I think it's now that I'm picking and choosing when I work, because I feel so much happier and so much more in control of the rest of my life. That I
wish you'd done it sooner?
I wish I'd done it years ago.
Do you?
Yeah, because I can go into work now and I know I'm working on the day that I've chosen to work. And it's quite fulfilling now because people are grateful that you're there because you're an extra pair of hands.
Yeah. The flip side of that then. I mean, do you want to just park COVID as a completely separate entity? What's been the most challenging part of it?
The most challenging area definitely is working in ED. And I just think
it's... what you see, basically. Processing what you see. And
that is very, very difficult in itself, processing what you see and some of the traumatic things that come in through the door. Yeah. And you do have to sort of put it in a box and switch off. But it is always there. So I think that's very, very difficult. But I don't think a lot of the time as doctors and nurses, we allow ourselves to fully process what we've seen.
You wouldn't do it.
Because I don't think we could go back in and do it again.
One of the questions I always ask is, what's the strangest thing that's ever happened to you?
I remember when we used to have to... Well, they probably still do, actually. We used to have to do like a decontamination we'd always do like a decontamination training on training days,
right.
just in case anybody decided to, I don't know, send some anthrax in the post or whatever to our department, or if there was any kind of strange substances or whatever. But there was one particular shift, I came on to shift, walked into the staff room, and there's like 20 of the staff sitting there in these tiny little towels, nothing else on, wet hair, in these little towels. And I'm like, what's happened? And something had happened. Somebody had brought a substance in. They'd had to decontaminate, basically. So the patient and all the staff had to go through this decontamination tent. Well, you just have to strip off everything. It gets bagged. You can't even have your mobile phone, nothing. Wow. It all gets bagged. You go through the decontamination tent. You have a cold shower. Ooh. Come out the other side. But this being the NHS, right, they've not got any nice big fluffy towels. Nobody's even thought about bringing sheets or blankets for these people. So basically all the staff, and, you know, of varying sizes, some probably need a bigger towel than others, are all just given this tiny little NHS towel. And then they have to walk through the whole department where all the patients are, all of them in these little tiny towels, and then sit for about 3 hours before they're allowed any of their things back. Nobody was allowed to leave, so it was the end of their shift, so they're all sat there.
Gosh, in tiny towels?
In tiny little towels.
And how were they about the whole thing?
I think they were a little bit... I mean, they were laughing because that's the kind of mentality when you work in this sort of area. Everything you have to find the funny side of things, don't you? But I think it was a little bit
annoying.
Yeah, it's like why would you not bring something else for them to wear?
Yeah,
and they just sat there in these little towels.
Yeah, surely they could just put clean scrubs on or something, couldn't they?
You would think so, wouldn't you?
But no.
I think. Do you know what it is? It's one of these things that's done in training, and you do it over and over in training, but you never think it's actually going to happen. Well, and then it actually happens. Nobody had the thought to think.
And maybe, like you say, the training wasn't really thorough enough. It obviously got to a certain point.
Yeah, because you don't actually in training strip off and go through the whole thing. You don't do that. You just do sort of pretend to do it.
Yeah.
So you don't get to the bit where it's like, oh, this towel doesn't really fit my body.
Okay, so our two final questions. One is, what advice would you give your younger self? And I would like to know that now. The Sal that we were describing earlier, and the Sal now, what would you say to her?
What? Don't worry if you're not everybody's cup of tea, I think. Yeah, I think because I've probably spent too much of my life worrying about whether people like me.
Yeah, what other people think.
And what other people think. Even though I probably came across very much the younger me, as I didn't care what anybody thought.
Yeah.
And I've always, I think, stuck very true to who I am. Like I haven't kind of tried to change myself to fit into anybody's
So even though you
box.
thought that,
even though I've thought that, I haven't acted upon it as such.
Yeah,
but I've still kept that internal worry at times of, do they like me?
Yeah. Okay, then my final question is always life advice to throw out there into the world for everybody.
Oh, gosh, that is a massive, massive, massive one, isn't it?
It is. It doesn't have to be one, you could pick a couple.
Gosh, life advice. Have a routine and have a morning routine that involves looking after you. Since I've been doing like a daily gratitude practice, finding the joy, you know, being thankful for the smallest things, then it snowballs, I think, into being grateful for the big things and then ultimate sort of happiness. But for me, it's having that routine and having
does that mean prioritising yourself a bit as well? Or?
Definitely prioritising yourself. Like 100%, you have to look after yourself first. Like that whole thing of fixing, you know, putting on your oxygen mask before you put on anybody else's.
No parent would do that though, would they? They'd all put the kids' one on.
You would always put your child's oxygen mask on first, yeah. You absolutely would. Although it's been drummed into you so many times. Do yours, do yours, do yours.
Yeah,
that you think,
just wouldn't, would you?
But it is that mentality that if I don't fill up my own cup, I have got nothing. I can't give my kids anything, really. I can't give anything of myself if I'm not happy. If I'm ultimately unhappy, whatever I try to give is going to be like I'm giving. It's half-hearted.
Tinged, isn't it? It's still tinged.
Exactly. Whereas if I'm giving from a place of happiness and gratitude and all of that, I've got so much more to give. Probably my biggest piece of advice is always keep moving. Always move forward, because it's so easy to stop and even to backtrack. But if you always are putting one foot in front of the other, it doesn't matter how slowly you're getting somewhere, you're still getting there. You're still making progress.
Thank you very much, Sally.
Thank you.
If you would like to hear more about this chat, see some behind-the-scenes pics and some personal profile pics, plus read about how to get started in this industry and or this role, then please go and support us on Patreon. The link is on this podcast page and across all of our socials. Sincere thanks in advance.